All right, we are live with part 2 of Yield Farming War Stories. It is Thanksgiving break. I have gained 7 pounds. I don't know how I feel about that. And yeah, I got my main man Isaac here after a brief break from last week. Isaac, how you doing over the break, man? How was your Thanksgiving?
It was good. Good Thanksgiving back in California. Took a break from being in DC. It's been nice, slower pace here. I'm not dressed as nice, if you noticed. I'm
Pretty
wearing,
nice
I guess
sweater.
I am kind of. I was gonna say it's a
That
polo.
sweater is
It's a
saucy.
hoodie. So,
That's saucy
yeah, fair
sweater.
enough. But it's not like my normal suits and button-up attire. Things are different here in California. So,
Oh, you guys still in slow?
yeah, we're in slow right now.
How long are you guys there till?
Wednesday.
Nice.
So 2 days.
Nice. Guys, if you don't know, it's not that famous of a place, but he's in a place called San Luis Obispo. That's where I used to live there, actually. They call it the happiest place in America. Super great weather, right in the central smack dab middle of California. And it kind of is really like enchanted. It makes me feel like I'm in Shrek or something like that, or Far, Far Away Island.
Yeah, definitely. Like I'm trying to think of other comparisons.
The only
Like
comparison I can think of is Carmel by the Sea. Kind of gives me
what's it called?
Carmel by the Sea.
Is that Carmel, the other California place just north of
Oh, did
Slow?
I fuck that name up that bad? Yeah, Carmel.
Yeah, that place is great. I mean, I think it's either or, honestly, because like people call Avila Beach Avila or Avila,
That's true.
and it's like, who cares, right? Tomato, tomato.
True. Cool, man. Well, let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to try to keep this episode brief, guys. Last week, we covered Isaac's biggest win and biggest loss, as well as going over like a few things to look out for when yield farming. In this episode, I'm going to reveal, as promised in the last episode, my biggest win and my biggest loss. Maybe we'll talk about the lessons to gain from that. And then Isaac's going to do like a pretty simple breakdown on delta neutral yield farming, what that is, how to do it, et cetera, et cetera. So let's get started. Should I start with the biggest win or the biggest loss?
Hey, it's kind of like an up to you thing. It's like good news or bad news, which one
Okay,
first?
you know what? I'll start in the order at which it came. And it's actually from the same, I'm not going to say the same protocol, but a fork of the same protocol. So my biggest win was actually tombfinance. So, man, is tombfinance still should be around. Let me see if they are.
I know tombfinance.
All right. So yeah, biggest win, tombfinance right here. I forget the price when I heard about it, but I heard about it really, really early. CoinGecko doesn't always go back, but I remember I got like a 20x or something on it. That was like crazy. And basically, if you go on the Tomb website, they have the Tomb token, they have T shares, then they have T bonds. So basically, the Tomb token, they control the price of the Tomb token with the T shares and the T bonds. When the price drops and they want to raise the price, I think if I remember correctly, the T shares would you can exchange Tomb for T shares, so it takes Tomb out of circulation and it brings the price up, supply and demand. And when the price is too high and they want to bring it low, then no, you could buy T bonds. And then when the price is too high and they want to bring it lower, T shares will print Tomb or something like that. They basically had bonds and like this printing. It was like, it's all, you can think of it as like a garage band Federal Reserve protocol.
Yeah, I was about to say, that sounds very Feddy.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess it worked for a short time. So that was my biggest win. It usually does. So I bought it because I heard about it in some Discord chat. It went up like crazy. I took profits on it, which was good. But here's where I messed up. And this is what led to my biggest loss. Now, when Tomb came up, you had a lot of protocols forking it. You had tombfinance with the number 2 OMB, 3 OMB. You had American Finance, you had Platinum Finance. It was so many different finance forks, but they essentially did the same thing as Tomb. They forked the code, but they called all of their tokens something different. Here's where I lost. I believe it was either the T shares or the T-bills that printed the actual tomb. So I think I bought like, and this was on Platinum Finance. So it was like one of the forks. And then another thing with the forks, the liquidity is usually 99.9% of the time not as high. So I was holding some of the other platforms token, and I remember it wasn't far from when I went and hung out with Alex the first time I met him. I remember driving back in the car with Eli, and I pulled up my wallet, and I had made like 30K in one day from this fork, and I was like, man, hell yeah, bro. 2 days later, I didn't take profits. I'm like, oh, it's probably gonna still keep going up. I think I ended up buying a little more. Bro, I got on my computer I think it was like 60 grand that I had bought in this token. Bro, it was worth $5, bro. I'll never
And you
forget
didn't take
that.
any profit.
None. None.
Bro, no, that is the worst.
Yeah. And this was like my third or fourth fork. The other ones I had made some good money on, not like
Yeah.
this. And I'm just like, I thought I had knew the system or whatever, but that's when you fuck up. So basically what happened was it was like a shitty smart contract audit. The devs were like all anon, so you know how that goes usually. And they figure out a way to basically do like a slow rug where they stole all the users' funds who were like holding the tomb, and they swapped it for, I think, DAI or something like that on chain. And the sucky part is, like, when it was all said and done and you added everything up, I actually lost more money from tomb forks just because I didn't take profit on that one when I should have at least took off half. So yeah, that's that. It kind of still stings talking about it. What lessons?
That's
yeah. What's your thoughts on that, man? I'm sure you've been through something similar. Like, what would you have done different in my shoes? What lessons could you take from that?
So immediate thought on that, and this is a rule that I had when trading, was never ever invest into anon projects. You want people doxxed. You want doxxed founders, people that can be held accountable if something goes wrong. That's a huge thing for me. And of course, some people are like, but that's the point of crypto. Pseudonymous shit is like embedded in the crypto culture. We just wouldn't fuck with it because it's too dangerous. And when people are pseudonymous, it's actually a good way for them to avoid legal liability when things go wrong and to avoid reputational liability. Because if you don't know who they are, if they don't have a reputation of making good, solid projects, if they don't give a shit about losing whatever reputation they currently have because they could just start up another pseudonymous profile, that's a huge red flag. There's not enough, I guess, incentive for them to be, appropriate with your funds. There's already minimal incentive for people that are, doxxed to be appropriate with your funds. If they're pseudonymous or anonymous, there's almost none. Like, they can do whatever they want. They could be a North Korean honeypot or whatever. Like, it could be anything. So that's like my first thoughts. And then I guess like my other one is when you're ever making like decent money on a small project, on any sort of like non-blue chip project, take profit. Like immediately. As soon as you think, should I take profit? Take profit. At least some. That's always my thoughts. It doesn't have to be 100%, but maybe it should be like 50%. Maybe you should take half off the table. And that's, that's generally my thoughts, is like aggressive profit taking. As soon as the thought is in your mind, take some, and never invest in anonymous projects. Those are my two thoughts.
Yeah, those are pretty great, man. Just to like piggyback on both of those. In Know It Owls, our two worst purchases / the two purchases we lost the most money on was paying developers and a marketing agency who we never saw their face on a call.
Yep.
Because like, man, think about it. Isaac, we've been doing these calls. We never have our cameras off. And even when I'm talking to people who I just met, I always keep my camera on because I'm not trying to hide anything. The only reason I would keep my camera off is because I didn't want them to know something about me or have like something on me. Because it's not like as soon as you turn on your camera, your address is showing. Like, they can't figure out where you are. So it's like a
100%.
general rule. A general rule for me is that, like, if I don't see your face, I'm not buying from you or investing into you, like you said. Second thing, because it's just like, man, everyone has egos, and it's like if you're building something that you believe on, you're gonna want the credit for it, or at least want your people to get the credit for it. One of the two. You're not. It's gonna want people to not know who you are, unless you're building something like Bitcoin and you're trying to like be a part of the future, and that's a whole nother thing. You get what I'm saying?
Bitcoin's in a category of its own because it started everything. So
Exactly. That Bitcoin needed to not have a leader. The other thing you said on profit taking is just like you're never going to be able to time the top. I think when you're thinking back on me, and if you as a listener think back to any time you didn't take profits, even if you think there's some gas still left in the tank, there's no way to know for sure when the top is going to come. So that means you're probably going to ride it to the top and back down some. So it's like if you know you can't time the top, take out a little bit. Like the goal should be at least to get your principal back within the quickest time frame as possible. So you're playing with house money. Then okay, you can be a little risky because you already got your principal back. But like he said, be aggressive in profit taking. Don't be as aggressive in investing. Be aggressive in profit taking because the whole point of this game is to like make money, right? So I definitely echo that sentiment. Whenever you can, take some profits, and even better, come up with how big of a market cap you think the project can have. Look at its competitors, get an average, and then go on your trading view and be like, okay, I'm taking this much profits here. This is how much I'll have left when it does another, I don't know, 2x or whatever. This is how much I'm taking. Have a plan together so that you know exactly when you're taking profits. Hey, if you have to set up a limit order if you can't get to your computer, but you definitely want to have a system in place so that you can know exactly how you're going to win. Because if not, you're relying on your emotions, and that's the last thing you want to be relying on once the market mania kind of sets in.
yeah, and I would say something that really helps me learn is I like to learn through aphorisms, and that's always best in like, in my opinion, quotes from like very famous and successful people that have a lot of wisdom to share. And one quote that I always remember for embedding this mindset is from Baron Rothschild, who was asked about how did you become so wealthy? How did you make all your money? And he answered this question by saying, I made this money by never buying at the bottom and always selling too soon. And that's how he did it. He's like, he never tried to time it, never tried to time exactly at the bottom, never tried to sell exactly at the top, because you never will, and you'll always, not always, but like you'll screw up enough times to counteract the positive times. And that's what he said. And I think this guy should know something, since he's probably heard of him. His name is Rothschild, so he's a pretty successful guy. I'd probably take his advice. But that's what I think about a lot of times when I'm considering when to sell, when to buy.
That's good stuff. Yeah, I think people need to hear that, because I think we all have this thing in our mind where we think we can time the top for some reason when it makes no logical sense. So that is it's a great quote. So that's my biggest win, my biggest loss. That's the lessons we took from that. Now, Isaac, if you don't mind, let's dive into the delta neutral farming strategy breakdown, whatever you want to call it. Maybe just start off explaining to people what it is, and then like maybe how to go about like setting up something that will be good for them.
All right, so we're going to talk very briefly on delta neutral yield farming. Now, delta neutral yield farming in its truest sense is basically impossible, almost impossible. I would say for practical reasons, impossible. And maybe for legal reasons, it's impossible. But what you can do is pseudo delta neutral yield farming, which is as close as you can get to delta neutral yield farming as humanly possible within the bounds of the laws of physics and mathematical science. But the basic idea of what pseudo delta neutral yield farming, and I'll probably say just delta neutral yield farming, but I mean pseudo delta neutral. What you're trying to do is you're trying to put in a certain amount of usually USDC or just some sort of dollar, derivative into an investment. And no matter what the markets do, you want to be able to pull out the exact same amount of dollar derivative as you put in. So you want to have no loss. Delta is a word that in finance means the difference between an asset and a derivative asset. For these purposes, delta is going to mean the difference between a asset and the investment value of an asset. Okay. So even though in like finance circles, this could be like if you have a dollar derivative or something and you invest into it, you want to make sure that dollar derivative remains close to whatever your investment was in dollars. In this, it's going to mean basically you have a dollar amount that you put into an investment and you want to be able to extract that same dollar amount with time being a non-factor. Of course, that's never going to be exactly correct, but you want to approximate this. That is the idea of delta neutral yield farming. Why is this useful? Well, it's useful for multiple reasons. One is simply you are a low risk investor. Of course, that seems to be a minority of people within crypto because everybody here is such a degen, but there is a small minority, I would say, that actually do care about very low risk in their investments, but they still want to be in crypto. Let's say you hold a lot of crypto assets. You're not really sure how the market's going to go. Probably a smart idea for you to find some sort of investment where you can guarantee a interest on it. So your money's not just sitting there doing nothing, but you could still pull out the same value of your investments and you don't want to have exposure to the market. So yeah, there's plenty of reasons why you want to do delta neutral yield farming. And when you do it, there are basically, I found kind of like two generic ways of doing delta neutral yield farming. This one kind of sucks though, borrow farming. And I would not recommend doing it because it still leaves you a lot of exposure. But the essential idea of borrow farming is that, let's say you have like $400 USDC position, you do a 2x leverage ETH USDC position, and you borrow $400 worth of ETH. And if you do this, you're technically not short any asset, but you still have exposure to a $400 borrowed ETH position. And I think the key to good delta neutral yield farming is being as hedged as possible. So you have as little exposure to kind of like these borrowed assets as you can. And if you do, you balance it out with other positions from other borrowed assets. So to understand that, let's get into this at first seemingly kind of complex delta neutral position that you can actually set up on Franconium. And it's actually an example that Franconium has on their website. So if you want to find it, you can go onto there. We're not endorsing Franconium on this, but they're just a really useful learning opportunity. And I have used them in the past. I haven't used them recently though. So explaining this, let's say you have 400 USDC. You take 100 of that USDC and you invest it into a 3x leverage ETH USDC position. And you borrow USDC to make that position work. So a 3x position is 100 USDC into ETH USDC position. 3xing it means you have to borrow 200 USDC in order to make this position work. And in Franconium, you can decide which asset to borrow, either ETH or USDC. So now you have 200 borrowed USDC and you have 100 USDC for a position with a total value of 300 USDC. Now, in order to make a ETH USDC position, you need ETH, obviously. So in order to do that, you're going to have to take 150 of your borrowed USDC and buy Ethereum. So by buying Ethereum with 150 of your borrowed USDC, you're now short $150 worth of ETH. Okay. So your short position is $150 worth of ETH. Now, you might be saying, well, I don't get this because I don't understand anything about finance, and you're talking to me about shorting and longing like I would have a pre-existing knowledge of that. Well, to understand that, you have to understand what shorting is. And essentially all shorting is, at least for these practical purposes, is that you're going to take an asset, borrow it, and then sell it into another asset. Oh, and sorry, I said short, I meant long on the 150 ETH US. So I meant long. Because what you're doing is to short, you have to buy or borrow an asset and then sell that asset for something else. Okay. In this first example, we borrowed 100 USDC and then we used 150 of that to buy Ethereum. So by borrowing USDC and buying ETH, we are now short USDC and long ETH. And the reason for that is because when the value of dollars goes up or down, when we are borrowing it, we have to repay whatever that value is. So $200 you borrow, you have to pay back $200. That's how that works. So when you buy another asset, you are now no longer exposed to the value of your borrowed asset. So when you buy Ethereum, you now are holding Ethereum, but you still owe $200. So if the value of Ethereum goes from $200, let's say, to $400, you could sell your Ethereum, pay back your borrowed position, and still have $200 left behind. So you are making the difference between the two. Now, if Ethereum were to drop from 200 to 100, and you sold the Ethereum back into dollars, you still owe 100 USDC in borrowed dollars because the difference is what you owe. So if it goes down, you have to pay. Does that make sense to everybody? Any hands in the audience? Okay, so by following that logic and selling 150 borrowed USDC to ETH, we are now long ETH 150 US dollars, okay? So that's our long position on ETH. So now we have to set up a second position in order to counteract that $150 value ETH long. So the second position is going to need to be $150 ETH short. So then we'll be delta neutral after both these positions have been set up. This is essentially a hedge position, okay? So we're hedging. So guys, in this case, we're gonna enter 100 USDC into a 3x ETH USDC position. And in this case, we're gonna be borrowing ETH instead of USDC. So we take 300 USDC and we borrow $600 worth of ETH. And then we get a 900 USDC valued total position. And in order for this to work out, just like in the last one, we're gonna need $450 worth of USDC, $450 worth of ETH to start with. So because we have 300 USDC and 600 ETH borrowed, we're gonna have to use our borrowed ETH in order to buy USDC. So the total position being 450 ETH and 450 USDC means that we have a difference in our starting capital of 300 USDC and $600 worth of ETH of 150 USDC that's going to need to be added to the USDC side. So that 150 USDC is going to be subtracted from our ETH borrowed capital. So we're going to take 150 of our $600 worth of borrowed ETH, and we're going to buy USDC. And by borrowing ETH and buying USDC, what does that mean? We are now shorting Ethereum because we are now in $150 worth of bought USDC using our borrowed Ethereum. So that $150 ETH short now counteracts our $150 ETH long. And after setting up both of these positions, in theory, we should be delta neutral. In reality, we are not though. And the reason why is because we actually still have a lot of leftover borrowed funds. So even after this, we still have a $600 worth of borrowed ETH that will need to be repaid at the end of this venture. And we will have 100 USDC or 200 USDC that will also need to be repaid. So if you go to Franconium, you'll notice that there still are like certain periods of financial movement that would lead to you being liquidated from this position due to the fact that your borrowed funds would basically, you would lose collateral for them. So you have to keep in mind that these positions are not foolproof. You also can do this on other accounts. Like you don't have to use Franconium. You could set up this position on almost any other yield farm application. Just Franconium is made for it. And any other yield farming application, you'd have to set up two different positions. It's a bit more precarious because you'd have to handle both these positions individually and calculate, when you would be liquidated and, you'd have to move your funds appropriately. But this is essentially how to minimize exposure to the market when yield farming. And do you have any thoughts on that, Vince? I think that sums it up.
No, that's some good stuff, man. Thanks for breaking that down. I was going to ask, when are the best and worst times to do this kind of strategy, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, the best and worst times are kind of the best and worst times to be invested in yield farming generally. But yield farming is interesting because, so now notice the big issue with these two. The big issue with these is that you're taking leverage on both. And when taking leverage, you're inherently exposing yourself to more risk than if you were just to be dealing with, let's say, no leverage and impermanent loss is your only issue. Because if impermanent loss is your only issue, you can always wait that out. Might take a long time, might really suck, but you can always wait out impermanent loss. It also depends on the assets, because sometimes you can't. If an asset goes to zero, you're kind of screwed forever. But assuming that you're on a platform that you can trust, and assuming that you're also in a liquidity pool with assets that are blue chip, you could probably wait that out almost every time. With this, you could get liquidated. And that's going to mean that you have to have, I would say, excess capital sitting on the sidelines to be deployed in order to save your position if there is the chance of liquidation. So this means that you can't just, YOLO it and invest all your funds into something like this. You would want to have some funds in maybe a single-sided liquidity pool, or sitting around just in pure reserves as dry powder, so you can execute on saving a position. Now, this is also going to be inherently, generally speaking, if you do this correctly, it is going to be inherently a lot safer than if you were to set up just a normal 3x position and not pay attention to, any of the other factors involved. Now, you risk losing exposure to the market. So I would say times where this is useful is when USDC is outperforming crypto, like most crypto assets. If USDC is outperforming Bitcoin and Ethereum and all the others, then it's probably good to stay delta neutral, because you want to be USDC exposed. You want to have USDC exposure so that when crypto bottoms, and you call it exactly right, like we always do, you'll be able to deploy into crypto and then have crypto exposure. What you could do, actually, which is kind of a fun thing to do that I've done a few times, is just remove your short position and then go only long when you feel as though the market has, bottomed out, generally speaking. And then you are long farming, which is pretty, cool. You can long farm and short farm. You can also do vice versa. You could just start with a short position because you really think the markets are going to go down, and then switch into a long position after that. But at that point, you're not even delta neutral yield farming. You're just long and short farming. But you can deploy these at different times because they are two different positions. And depending on when you deploy them, you could enter into a delta neutral position, jump out of a delta neutral position into a long or short position, which gives you some versatility. And all while this is happening, you're building interest, you're gaining interest. Now, of course, jumping in and out of positions also exposes you to other risks, being, hopefully it wouldn't be impermanent loss in this case, but, issues like liquidation, market volatility, and so on and so on. And then just the general issues of, like, the longer you are in any position, the more chances of black swan events, which apparently happen 3 times in a year now.
Yeah,
could end up wiping.
They seem more common nowadays.
Yeah, at what point do they stop being black swan events is what I'm always wondering.
I don't know, man. Shit. At the point when they stop dropping things 50%, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's when BlackRock successfully buys out all of crypto. That's when the black swan events will somehow go away.
Yeah, hopefully. No, that's good stuff. Yeah, I find that the best times to yield farm are like when the market's going down, like short farming, and then obviously crap markets when things are consolidating, and then in the beginning phases of a bull market during like the accumulation phase. And the reason why I say that is because, like, the other two are obvious, but a lot of people are like, oh, the market's going up, I want to get out. What you could do is, obviously you can't time market bottoms and tops, but you can confirm momentum. And then that would say it's a high probability that the momentum is going to continue and we could possibly see a bull market. So if you look at your chart and you see a major area that's been acting as resistance, you know that in order for a bull market to happen, that resistance has to be not just broken, but has to be broken and then tested as support again. And then what I like to see is a nice big green candle print on top of that new support. And what you can do is, like, if you're yield farming, you can set the top of your range to be where the market has to be in order for a breakout to happen. So that way, if your breakout's confirmed, you automatically exit out of your position with your cash, assuming you're in a ETH USDC or Bitcoin USDC. Volatile yield farms are also good in bull markets. Like, those are the best yield farms to be in bull markets, unless you're just using it to take profits. But if you have like ETH and Chainlink in a pool, one of them's going to outperform the other, but they're both going to move in tandem most of the time in the same direction. So yeah, just going back to that, like, if the markets, it exits your position, you're out with cash. If you're in an ETH USDC or a volatile stable pair, now you have your cash. And since the bull market's confirmed, put air quotes around that, now you can take that cash and enter into a position. And hey, if it's not confirmed and the market goes back down, it's never a bad idea to sit on some cash at all times, but maybe even have like a short yield farming position set up. So like, going back to the ETH USDC position or example, if ETH has to hit 2,500 to confirm a breakout, and let's say it hits 26 and now you're in a long position, maybe set up a position from 2,500 back down to 1,800. So just in case it goes down, not only are you generating passive income, but you can use something like Aperture Finance that says, hey, if ETH goes down to 2,000 or 2,100, exit me out of my position. So now you just got paid to buy the dip. The bull market wasn't confirmed. You still have your cash. Now you bought the dip. You made a little bit of money from interest, and you're still in a good position to take advantage of whatever circumstance presents itself. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment of the situation.
Well, guys, if you got value from this video, Isaac, again, thanks for breaking that down. We ask that you consider subscribing, share with a friend, drop a like, comment, let us know what strategy or anything in regards to yield farming or portfolio strategy that you would like for us to cover or talk about. Other than that, we're going to try to maybe get some guests on here to hear about more war stories. A lot of times, it's not about what you can do. It's about knowing what you're not supposed to do. And then if you just don't do that, a lot of times you'll succeed. So we're going to try to get that covered for you guys. But until the next video, we'll catch you on the next one.